Hello everyone, it's Ross here, teacher talk.
Yeah, it's on.
On mute. Welcome. Just doing a little bit of admin and getting people signed in. I should be coming on your camera now. So still good morning, just about if you're watching in England. So I've got a lot of people. 16 different countries, which is very, very flattering. So obviously UK specific, for people watching elsewhere. You should be able to see, let me just get my slides on the screen. I'm going to kick off in 2 or 3 minutes. I'm going to go to the chat box. I know a lot of you have been using Zoom for a while. I'm just going to type hello in there. If you could just tap your screen if you're watching on a mobile phone. On a device should be straightforward. Sorry, on a desktop. Just tell me where you're watching from in the chat box. Say hello. From Shanghai, fantastic. And I'm just going to do a tiny bit of admin and we'll get started. I have no idea. Firstly, thank you for signing up. I've got no idea why I said 45 minutes. It's probably going to take a little bit longer. But if you have to go, don't worry, everything's recorded. I'll send you all the slides. I'm going to chuck loads of resources at you and go through the kind of key ideas and model 1 or 2 if I can. So again, if you have to go, don't worry, it's all recorded. I'll send it to you later. You'll probably hear my son blowing his trumpet downstairs. Day 35 for me here at home. Okay, so chat box, enter where you're from, grab a cup of coffee, maybe have a bit of paper to hand, pen. I'm going to send you a few links through through the email as well as through the chat box. In fact, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to send you a link to all the slides. I'll do this through Eventbrite anyway. But I'm going to send you a link to all the slides and the resource pack. So this is what this is what I normally do, give to schools for a full day training. So I've just popped it through on the chat box there. Again, I'll send it through Eventbrite, so don't worry. And I'll kick off in a couple of minutes. So if you just join us, just say hello in the chat box. Where are you watching from? I hope you're all safe and well. Very interesting times. While we're waiting, so Mark Plan Teach for me is a 6 or 7 year journey now. And something I built as a deputy head in my last school with 110 teachers. So I'll give you the context shortly. And moving over to teacher training full time. It's my 3rd year now. I've lived it now in about almost 200 schools in 15 countries. So it's been fascinating. So I'm going to give you the insights, the highlights. And I know some of you watching may have the book, some of you won't, but so I'm going to give you a digital copy. And I'm actually writing a version 2 as we speak. So that's going to be out in January based on all the things I've seen in the schools on my travels. So I'm going to get started. I'll just be a little bit distracted letting people into the chat room. You've got the link to the slides already. And I suspect I'll be probably an hour rather than 40 minutes. So if you need to dash, don't worry, it's all going to get recorded. I'll send everything to you. So thanks for watching. First thing I always start off with is this great quote from a professor that I interviewed for my podcast from Harvard. There's a special place reserved in hell for teachers who don't share. These ideas aren't mine. They're ideas I've learned in my career and from others, and also things that may have tweaked in my own practice. And I really firmly believe that profession such as teaching can only be as good or as strong, or yourself as a professional, on that remit that you are sharing your knowledge. So I often say face to face in schools, and I do a little kind of survey of the experience in the room, that the wiser, more experienced teachers, if we have to move towards a system, at least here in England, where we have a lot more experience in the profession, then we need to develop more systems at a kind of system level, macro level, where our government funds those wiser teachers. So that's my kind of first stance share. If I just go on to this on what's in the book. So I was going through my own, deputy head in a city school in Westminster, pushing easily 65 to 80 hours a week. The life of a blogger also, which was always voluntary, but was something I enjoyed, exacerbating my workload to a degree. But the school at the time, I'd gone through a very difficult circumstance, 4 interim head teachers. Some of you will remember, or most of you will remember ISIS. So Jihadi John was an ex-student at the school, so I had all this kind of kicking off. And the teachers were desperate for some consistency, but more importantly, some clarity on what were expectations. So the kind of headline in Mark Plan Teach was, while I was reading and blogging, I was also developing a Mark Plan Teach, a teaching and learning policy, which became our Mark Plan Teach methodology. And essentially, we sent our students home on a Wednesday night, about 2:30, and we had CPD every week for 3 years as we built this up. And what we did was, as the school developed some thinking, some theories, we looked at books, publications, I was blogging our ideas, I was getting feedback from across the globe, and I was taking it back into school and getting that feedback. And I think in hindsight, it's allowed me to share ideas widely that are probably explain why the book perhaps has been a bit more popular than I ever imagined. Is it's allowed that feedback loop from a system level back into school, through the blog, through the teachers, where it was built from the ground up. The key things within the book are that it was all designed to reduce workload and improve pupil performance, and particularly teacher well-being. And the mantra of that, we need, if we do less, we can improve our performance. So obviously I'm doing this is the first time I'm doing this remotely, so I'm not sure how most of the ideas will come across, because normally I would do this physically with teachers through practical examples, and it would be a 6-hour inset day. So trying to do this in a webinar for an hour is going to be a challenge. So that's the kind of highlights. A couple of things I'm going to signpost to you. First of all, here are all the cartoons. Now, if I just explain, so we've got 60,000 words in the book. No teacher's got time to read 60,000 words. If I think of the 12 million teachers now that have read my website, the average reading time of a teacher on the site is 1 minute 30 seconds. So with the emergence of retrieval, memory, dual code, and all these great things that are immersed in the teaching profession, I thought, well, why don't I produce, rather than the 5,000 words of one chapter, into a cartoon? So if I just go behind the scenes into my drive, I'm just going to show you that. I'm going to send all these to you shortly, show you how to access them. So for schools that don't have the book, I give them all these. So this is all the 30 ideas on a 1-page summary. Still a little bit cognitive overload. There are the 10 ideas in the Mark section of the book. Mark is essentially assessment. Assess, plan, teach, I don't think it's a catchy name for a book, so I went with Mark. There's the 10 ideas, and then each sketch note is a 1-minute summary. Why? Teachers don't have time to access complicated information in the day-to-day practice. So I got all these produced so that teachers, departments, teams could pick out an idea, see what it says on the cartoon, and essentially dig into the book if they wanted a bit more detail. So you're going to get all 34 of those, and you can do what you want with them in school, turn them into a little magazine, a little booklet, print them off, put them in the staff room when you get back to schools, all sorts of things. So I hope you enjoy those. First thing you need to do is, that's the code. So let me just put that in the chat box. Again, it's all recorded, so don't panic, and I will all send it through. So it's in the chat box. I'm going to send you the hyperlink here on the website. So that's coming through now. And essentially what you do is add it to your basket. So up here, into here, just put in your email address. And then when you go to checkout, let me make sure I'm using the site correctly, just type in the coupon here. I press apply and it will remove the price from the front end, kind of Joe Public, so that you can get all those that way. Second thing I did, about 1.5 years ago, I stuck myself in an office and I filmed myself go through the whole inset day. So again, if you want to watch it all on videos, and again, it's just me in a room on my own, it's not as exciting as doing it with a room full of teachers, but this is the code for the videos. Let me just send you through these links. This is all on the chat box, so just copy and paste that. I'll send you the chat box extract so you can see it all. And any technical issues, just let me know. Just make sure your browser's up to date, all the usual technicalities. And any issues, just let me know. So that's 5 hours of videos, me walking through the ideas. And then you've got the 34 sketch notes. So there's tons of resources already. Now, I'm going to try something first time on a webinar. I don't know if this will work. I often, first thing I do is I get everyone on their devices to type this address into a mobile phone. So if you're watching on a mobile phone, you may or may not be able to do this, but if you can type this web address into your browser, I'm going to activate a question, and I want you, so I'm just going to present this full size. I want you to type in on your website, so the address is POLL, so here it is at the top, ev.com/teacher toolkit. And if this is working, if not, I'm going to give up. Yeah, there it is. Just type in one word. What's your workload issue at school? Not obviously now. I'm conscious of the virus stuff going on. So I've got one response. Thank you. So type this into your browser or your mobile phone. Here's the address. And you can do it many times. So type in one word at a time. I'll give you 30 seconds. Let's see if we can get about 50 responses here. And give me your workload issue, whether you're a school leader or a teacher or a teaching assistant watching, and let's see what happens. Okay, great, it's working, so thank you. So POLLEV.com/teacher toolkit. Keep them coming. You can do 5, 6, as many as you want, but just one word at a time, and it'll build up this nice little Wordle. Okay, great. Okay, so time always features in the life of a school teacher, but you'll notice if we ignore time, because that's always a factor, marking drives, I can tell you this for free, marking drives teachers crazy across the world in any type of school setting. Now, I've used this particular survey with 23,000 teachers I've met face to face, and in every type of school, that word appears. Okay, if I'm with school leaders exclusively, like at a conference or something, then the word safeguarding, emails or parents often features. But marking is the key issue that drives teachers nuts. You'll notice also planning and paperwork and admin are the next biggest words. So the bigger the word, the larger the issue. And I can see you still flood them in, so we've got about 200 results there. So I'm going to come off of that, so marking. I'll come back to this one later. So based on that information, I often use this as a way to kind of script the mood of the training in the school. And I end up spending a good couple of hours on the training day going through all the assessment ideas or the marking ideas within the book. Now, if I just touch on a little bit of research, so my life as a blogger and a school leader, getting a bit more interested in policy decisions, started to get quite fascinated with the landscape, at least within the English profession. I think where I'm at now is looking at not only teachers across the UK, but one example, if I just go to my blog, is I look at the OECD surveys, the Teaching and Learning International survey, which was published last month. So teaching and learning in England, and as I visit different countries now, I look at their workforce workload data for teachers and analyse the life and behaviours of teachers also in different countries. So this one, I've picked out the things that are happening in England in comparison to 47 other countries in terms of professional development, teacher autonomy, work satisfaction, salary. And England, in my opinion, is languishing mid-table here. There'll be no surprise here that teachers want to be trusted, but actually this research shows that England, out of 48 countries, are in the bottom quarter in terms of teacher agency, which is kind of affirms what I see on the ground when I meet with teachers. So I'm looking at a lot more research internationally, but this is where I started in 2013. The Department for Education Workforce Census is published every year. It's a head count of all the teachers in English state schools. So broadly speaking, in the UK, you've got 32,000 schools, 19,000 are primary, 3,000 or 4,000 are secondary, rest make up PRUs, special schools, those types of things. So this is English state schools. We've got last time I checked, it was 453,000 qualified teachers. Well, not all qualified, I should add. There's about 5% unqualified, but headcount 453,000. 2 summers ago, so July, August 2018 was the first time more teachers left the profession than entered, and that number was just a few hundred. But that's never happened before. And if you look at the data going back 20 years, you can see obviously here, more, so 18,000 teachers, the numbers are increasing. Why? Well, we've got more pupils in England, we've got more schools, so we need more teachers. But we often hear in the press that teachers leave within the first 5 years. But when you look at the greatest attrition, it happens in the first year and the second and third. So actually that myth is not true. That, of course, 40% of teachers leave within the first 5 years, but the greatest dropout happens in the first formative years. A few little stats for you. The average lifespan of a teacher is 13 years in the English system. And so me doing 25 years of teaching, I had about a 36% chance. I'm 47 or 46 and a half. I could go back in the classroom and teach another 20 years, could. So what's stopping me, or what's stopping the system keep on to more experienced teachers? Now, I'm not going to get into political stuff here and neoliberalism and all those types of things, but market forces, life gets in the way, broken legs, things like that, mortgages. You know, and the interesting thing, if we think of children as a product, the child stays the same, they have the same cognitive ability, but as I get more experienced, my body gets slower, my memory gets more limited, my energy levels drop. You know, I've rarely met a teacher that has taught 40 years. I've probably met about 10 on my travels, and I've only had the privilege of working with 1 or 2 in my career who've sustained that length of career service. The Workload Challenge Report. So this is one thing the DfE promised on a stage, Nicky Morgan, so Secretary of State, if you're not watching in England, 2013, she did the Workload Challenge Survey. This happens every 2 years. So I'm showing you this now to compare with where we're at today. 44,000 teachers responded, 56% said marking, 53, the second one, and analysing data on SIMS, Progresso, ISAMS was 56. I highlight staff meetings. Very rarely you'll find a teacher or a school leader who likes meetings because they're laborious, they're lengthy. I think in my life as a deputy head, I was probably spending 15 hours a week in appraisal meetings, department meetings, team meetings, and all sorts. So lots of research on stand-up meetings, walkabout meetings, or if we've got an hour after school and I've just taught a 5-period day, maybe 20 minutes together, stay for some fact questions, frequently asked questions, or off you go and get on with the jobs I've asked you to do. So there's lots of workload solutions there. So these are the reasons these are the workload issues that drive teachers crazy. Bit of research, why do teachers leave? So these are ex-teachers who come back to the profession, leave again. Workload's the biggest reason. You've got Ofsted school inspection in there. You've got behaviour. We all teach tough kids. We all need to be paid a bit more, but workload is the biggest pressure time and time again that make teachers leave the profession prematurely. On Twitter, I know it's not a very reliable source of data, but I've been conducting surveys with my 250,000 followers for about 4 or 5 years, and I do it every 3 months. And I ask them where are the influences. So you'll see the light blue line are school leaders. And when I say school leaders, I mean anyone with a teaching and learning responsibility, not just the head teacher. But you can see that's dropped. This dark blue line is school inspection. And with the latest curriculum reform, you can see it's spiked. What gets measured gets done. The yellow line is the DfE goalposts, but interestingly, the green is teacher habits. just because you mark all your books doesn't make you a good teacher. But even if the policy says don't mark or do mark, it's perhaps our own bias or the preferences of how we like to work. This research is interesting for our bias. Apparently the latest research, this was published by Education Policy Institute, teachers are working fewer hours. Now, obviously we need to look at, before you all laugh, the data behind this, what type of teacher, experience, what's the role. But interestingly, for the last 20 years, you'll see that the data is between 45 and 55 hours a week that teachers work. School leaders, it goes to 65 to 80. So that's pretty much during term time, the working habits of teachers, which is now informing my doctoral studies. I'm looking at teacher agency, teacher behaviours through my website, but also through lots of this. So this is the research that led towards what Mark Plan Teach. And in summary, that introduction would be these easy fixes: reduce meetings, so many more schools are moving to just one meeting a week. A lot of schools have moved away from marking to feedback policies. A lot of them are also getting rid of mark once a week. Coloured pens, research from Teacher Chat, for example, recently stipulated that if you work in a school with a higher proportion of disadvantaged pupils, your school's more likely to say mark once a week and use this coloured pen. There is a little bit of research on coloured pens and its benefits, and obviously context matters. You're all working with different kids in different schools, so what works is what works. Teaching and learning policy, it's not statutory. You're not required to have one by law. So the interesting question for our leaders out there is, yes, coherence, yes, clarity, but not if it's used to beat either teachers against the head, or if I come to inspect your school, I hold you to account for a non-statutory policy that you've published. So the last 2.5 years, this one slide best sums up what I've seen on my travels delivering Mark Plan Teach. That illusion of chasing consistency. All the schools I work with, so probably pushing nearly 200, I asked them for their teaching and learning policy. Some are smart with one-page policies, some call it guidance rather than the statutory document. Others don't have them, others are 20 pages long. Most schools have at least been here to get to the middle. We have 1 or 2 schools over here where there's no rigour. There's no accountability, or you get the odd teacher who closes the doors, doesn't want to share their ideas, or doesn't want to lead CPD despite their experience. And what I've seen on my travels, interesting couple of anecdotes, is teachers here being bullied, leaving the profession, or they go and work overseas or in another type of setting, close the doors, no one observes them, they worry about losing their skills, come back 7 or 8 years later, and wonder how they're lagging behind the dialogue. The happier schools are doing these things: efficacy, looking at research. So I think back to Mark Plan Teach, we essentially looked at research, blogs, books, talked about teaching and learning on a weekly basis, and it was protected and all school leaders had to attend. We looked at research, we looked at blogs, we looked at books, and we developed not a physically open door culture, but a culture of talking about ideas. So in the chat box, could you just tell me where you think, before the virus, where your school is on this scale? Are you on the left, middle, or the right? So give me a left, middle, or right on the chat box, please. Okay, lots of lefts and middles. Okay, got 1 on the right. Okay. Okay, thank you. Now, I would argue that if you've been here, often either through bullying or through school inspection pressure or results, these things then happen. Mark once a week, use the red pen. I'm talking about here teaching and learning, not behaviour or something. But once we've got this hymn sheet that teachers have signed up to and agreed to, and it starts to become a rhythm or heartbeat of the school, we can then loosen up and allow our teachers that teacher agency to be a bit more freer and to adapt, because there's been lots of training that take place. So to achieve autonomy, in my opinion, you need a small dose of accountability on a frequent basis. So Mark Plan Teach, I'm going to signpost the key ideas. Remember, you're going to get all the ideas in here. So these are 1-minute summaries of all the 30 chapters. So in summary, if I could surmise the kind of key concept, it would be these 3 sentences. Assessment is regular, it's proportionate to curriculum time, and the main job of the assessment is to diagnose what the pupils have to do. As a result, I build up a secure overview of where my students are, where they need to get to, and how I help them along the way are all my interventions. This data, so when I say assessment, it's the classroom, was Ross absent last week, what's the home environment like, all that assessment data to plan my lesson. I don't believe we should plan lessons first. We need to look at our assessments. And I know it's a loop here, so you need a degree of being in the classroom first. But that assessment data, the logistics of the classroom, the students in front of you, the pastoral side, to inform the lesson plan. So it's a sequence. But that then allows me to look at why. So curriculum intents, curriculum implementation, and impact of the choices that I make. So I'll talk at the end about dual coding, retrieval practice, memory. But the greatest resource in any classroom is the teacher. Time and time again, research signposts, the quality of teaching matters. So the plan I'm going to highlight later. Then the teach, I wish, and a lot of institutions today, University of Buckingham, other places that I work for, Goldsmiths College, are now giving their NQTs more cognitive science, which is great. I had cognitive science as a trainee teacher, but I didn't really get immersed with how to learn, particularly with a short-term and long-term memory. And if I'd known that, I would have been able to better teach thoughtfully using explicit subject language. Obviously, I've developed over the years quizzing techniques, questioning techniques, and then deciphering not just verbal signals, but non-verbal signals, and I'll model one of those later. So one of the biggest ideas in the book was the yellow box. This was a great marking strategy. Now, I now call this zonal feedback. I banned the word marking because feedback includes written, it includes verbal feedback, and it includes non-verbal feedback. Ross, hurry up, we've not got much time left. So just a reminder, I'm probably going to go to 1 o'clock. So the Department for Education, when we looked at the workload challenge from Nicky Morgan, there was some working parties, curriculum planning and marking. The marking committee, after a year of report and writing, these were the 3 words that emerged that I took away. When I assess or mark a child's book, it has to be manageable for me. My feedback has to be meaningful and motivate the child to do it with or without me in the classroom, and also including at home. So here's just some screenshots. I'm sure most of you who follow me on Twitter will have seen all this. Zonal feedback, find one thing, tackle a misconception or a grammatical mistake, and the student redrafts it. If it's focused, they can do it in the class. I can use a quick script, or it can be assigned as a homework activity. Here's a maths example. I'm just going to open up a couple of documents. I'm going to show you a good example here, and I'm going to show you a bad example when kind of the practice or the theory is lost in practice, I suppose. So yellow box, let's start off with, here's a good one. So I've got slow broadband. This is in Welsh. This is the Battle of Hastings, but the teacher's done a quick bit of assessment. Empty yellow box, key question. Here you'll notice Gilvar in Welsh, that means smart. And here you'll notice the student's written Gelvin, which is smarter. So the teacher's tackled not only the redraft, but has tackled also a misconception with grammar. A bad example, we've all been here, I tick everything, and the yellow box strategy is here, but the teacher's carried on the entire assessment. Now, if we look carefully, we've got a tick here on the word now, got a tick here on the word wasn't. I can't see any assessment criteria being annotated. I know that might be a separate thing, but if the student looks at this on their own without a verbal feedback with the teacher, this is a classic example of cognitive overload, and the student may just want to look at the grade rather than what the diagnostic assessment says. So that's just a simple example. Now, all this ideas, going back to 2015-14 time, it led to me wanting to research verbal feedback. So I'm going to put this in the chat box. This is on my site also. This is my verbal feedback report. So there's the link in the chat box. I was frustrated as a design technologist when inspectors came to my classroom, or also as a school leader walking with inspectors around the club and school leaders, that their bias was that everything had to be written down. And having worked in workshops or drama classrooms or PE classrooms, we know that feedback often isn't recorded. So this research, in a nutshell, suggested that if teachers use verbal feedback techniques, there's no detrimental impact on their outcomes. In fact, in some cases, the teachers reported that their outcomes were improved. So this is 13 teachers from 7 state schools in England over the last academic year, and we published this report in September 2019. You'll read all their case studies, all the strategies inside, and what the research concludes, and the evidence behind speaking to children and using verbal techniques. I'll introduce 1 or 2 others in a moment. Another concept, so all the policies that I grab from different schools, this is probably the best one I've seen. It's a 1-page summary, perfect for teacher workload. It's got the vision and values at the top. There's just 4 sentences on the right-hand side here that are teacher accountability. What I love about this is every teacher, so this is the autonomy, I think once accountability is addressed, every teacher's free to determine with their class how they provide feedback. So great, no more being directed. Pupils should explain how they get feedback. So it's a primary school, 30 teachers, by the way. So obviously here with deep dive, so people watching abroad, this is where you go in and look at pupils' books as part of an evaluation scrutiny. My argument here is, in terms of being a researcher, is if you're going to ask children some questions and then go off and do your deep dive or work scrutiny in the classroom next door, they have to be the same questions. And people watching who are primary teachers, if you ask these questions to a reception child, you're probably going to have to ad-lib their answers and your questions to elicit something meaningful compared to an older student. So deep dives with lots of warnings and disclaimers. This one, no expectation that verbal feedback will be recorded. Great, no verbal feedback stamps, no voice recordings. I'm allowed to be autonomous. And then the last one, there is an expectation that feedback will have a direct impact on outcomes. Great. However, of course, outcomes mean exam results, but what you'll find in the verbal feedback report is outcomes can be defined: reduction in exclusions, punctuality to lessons, hands up in class, all sorts of ways that you can track outcomes. So a great policy with a couple of recommendations. I think that's one of the best I've seen on my travels. So if you want to grab that, let me just signpost this. You type in the word probably on my website. I've called this, without getting litigation by Carlsberg, probably the best teaching and learning policy in the world. A little summary from me in this blog, and then you can download the PDF at the bottom and take a little look and see if there's anything that you can steal. There it is there. Okay. Other things that are talked in the book, in the first chapter, Pygmalion effect. I won't go into this too much, but there's lots of psychology in the book. And one thing I haven't mentioned yet is I work with Dr. Tim O'Brien, who's a former teacher, psychologist, maths teacher, who's given me a lot of support in terms of the cognitive science. If you've not watched the Pygmalion effect on YouTube, it's a 5-minute video. It is a must watch. Research with a disclaimer, it's 60 years old, but I still think it's important to watch because essentially it looks at teacher bias. If I told you Ross was a naughty pupil when I give you the data and you're teaching him for the year, that's going to inform your behavior and your decisions. The student turns up, they're in set 4, I misbehave, I only complete the minimum work because I've been labelled, I get only a grade D or a level grade 5, and it reinforces what I thought about the pupil. So it's setting that glass ceiling. There's the summary. I won't go through it all, but if you've not looked at the clip on YouTube of the Pygmalion effect, 5-minute watch, it is brilliant. It's been around for years. My conclusion is that your belief in a child actually improves their their scores, their motivation, their attendance, all sorts of things. And these were the research conclusions. If you think kids are clever or you think that kids are not so, it affects your input as a teacher. Obviously go into the research a little bit more. Other strategies, so Live Marking, Education Endowment Foundation, they published a paper 2016 called A Marked Improvement. Quality, not quantity. just because you mark all your books doesn't make you a great teacher. So in the first set of slides, the sketch notes talk about all these different things that you'll do. It's a bit like a live feedback process in class. The best tip I can give you is using a visualizer. Now, if I rewind 25 years, never had one. It was an OHP projector and a blackboard. Then it moved to whiteboard. Then it was interactive. And then we started to have flatbed scanners, which were £2,000 or £3,000. It was lucky if we had one per department. And then we moved on to little visualizers. So you can get lots of these. This is the one I use. It's got a camera, it's a real microscopic lens, it's got a light, it's Wi-Fi, so I can carry it around the classroom or use an iPad, Apple TV. With this methodology that I do it first, kids, watch me write the paragraph on the board or under the camera. I'll do a drawing or dissect the heart inside an animal, or then we do it together, then you do it on your own. And this is backed by lots of research I'll signpost later. So the modeling mantra. Quick signpost to this idea, the 5-minute marking plan. It won't do your marking for you, sadly, but it will allow you to go through your new curriculum, or if you teach someone else's scheme of work, to work out what the assessment points are. So there's lots of things in here. If I signpost where those are, you go to the 5-minute lesson plan, which is probably the most popular resource. A little kind of goodie area that people don't often, I probably should make this more clearer, but if you click any of these images, you've got a whole set of 35 other types of plans, including the 5-minute marking plan, which is here, number 6. But I've just thought about all aspects of school life. And I guess looking at cognitive science terms, this is me dual coding the busy nature of teacher life on a page. Anything from picking up the phone when an inspector calls, to strategies, keynotes, which I now do every day, all sorts of things in here. So do take a look at that, there's lots. So that'll walk you through, and if you type the title in, the 5-minute plan, you'll get a blog explaining how to use the plan. Austin's Butterfly, Ron Burger's work. This is a great video. Do watch it if you've never seen it. And if you have the opportunity, whether it's remotely or back in schools eventually, show it to your kids. I always used to show this during the exam season, and it showed how your first attempt isn't always your best attempt, and with specific explicit feedback, it can be improved. This is just one summary from Dr. Tim O'Brien, so the psychologist that I work with, in terms of how we can motivate children. He's done a lot more in the book, so he's written a summary of most chapters, but I'm just going to signpost that he talks about motivation, self-esteem, confidence, and some of the things that teachers can do, and it's in line with each of the chapters in the book. So I just want to signpost that. This is on the blog, not in the book. These are all things that all of us do, trying to make our life easier. And I'm dwelling on marking a little bit more because you've said it on the survey. I used to think I was cheating as a teacher, but actually what I was trying to do was optimize. And I've only really started to understand that I was trying to reduce the burden, the time. So you'll do all these. I'll just signpost 8 and 9 are really simple ideas. Number 8, right kids, when you leave today's classroom, can you open your books to today's page and leave it on my hands as I'm standing at the door? 1, I know that you've given me your book, and 2, I don't have to waste 30 seconds flicking through to find what page to mark. 30 seconds times 30 kids, I'm going to save a lot of time. Number 9, if you stack your books on kids' tables, go to the books and mark them there rather than take them back to your table in the classroom or in your bag in the car on the way home and leave them in your boot of your car for a couple of weeks before you mark them in the holidays. Whole class feedback sheets. This was a great idea that came from Michaela, school in West London. A mixed reputation, but has done a lot of great work to immerse teacher workload. This idea goes back a number of years now, about 5 years. Principle is 30 books, again, changing that narrative that I give feedback. I don't mark the books. I've got 30 books on my table. I annotate this one page. I then bring it back to classroom and I script it to individual children or groups. I show this on the screen. There's a danger that if Ross's name always appears here, I'm going to decrease his motivations, confidence, self-esteem. But it's a great idea, and maybe try considering using that as a method rather than always having to mark every single piece of work. And one of the nice things I do in my travels, not this year sadly, but as a teaching award judge, I go and see the ICT or the innovative technology teachers out there developing apps and websites. So you'll see all these. One thing that sparked my awareness a couple of years back was this one, QWIQR. QR sticker, stick it in the kid's book. I can scan, video, photograph. It builds up a cloud of work, so great if they lose their book, but also it allows me to scan something earlier from gone by and hear what was said. I'd signpost one more blog for you. So back on the blog, when we went into lockdown, I thought, right, let me just write a list of ideas off the top of my head. So these aren't all the things in the world, and everyone's got their own, but these were just ones that came to mind. 46 ideas for pupils, sharing videos. I'm on Zoom now, and then loads of ideas for teachers. So have a look at that if you haven't looked at already. And one thing I saw in the chat box, ZipGrade. This is called ZipGrade. So it's a great way to kind of scan multiple choice assessments and do the marking for you rather than you have to do it. This idea, this is the last idea in the mark section. I used to work with a head teacher who was paralysed from the neck down. He's still a head teacher in Tottenham today. He used Drag and Dictate, which is voice artificial intelligence software, and it learns from your accent. It can learn grammatical commands. You do little tutorials. So when I discovered this 15 years ago, working as a young assistant head teacher in Tottenham, in kind of North London, I thought, that's great. I'm going to use it for my own work. So I started to use it for policies, for emails, for marking, and I use it to write my book. So Mark, Plan, Teach, in fact, Just Great Teaching, my new book, I automated it all through speaking on my device. You've got here Cortana, Siri, Evernote, which syncs between the clouds, and you've got a million of these on iTunes now. But Google Docs, and I'm sure Microsoft, they all have these features. This is also on your phones, mobile phones. If I just open up a document, I'm going to do a little demo here. I used to do policies or marking in this way. If I go to Tools and Voice Type in, if I change the language, so I might be providing feedback in Spanish, French, German, if I'm teaching a language, English, UK. If I take my hands off the keyboard, I'm just demonstrating how to provide written feedback simply by speaking into my device, full stop, new paragraph. Imagine if you could work in this way, question mark. So anyone using this technology, give me a yes in the chat box. Let's give me a bit of feedback. Anyone using voice automation? Okay. Okay, a couple of people. So if you type voice dictation in the chat box, I've got a little YouTube demo. Let me just see if I can find it. So a lot of my critique, let me see if I can spell first, dictation. A lot of the critique I got in the early days was, how does Ross manage to be a deputy head and write so much stuff? I was simply speaking on my phone on the journey home from school and putting an image on the blog and just putting it out there. The average reading time of an adult is about 300 words per minute. So if I speak to my device for a minute, I get a 300-word blog. 12 years later, having written 1.5 million words on the site, looking at the analytics, teachers only read the website for a minute, so I only need to speak for 1 minute and try and summarize an idea. So here you've got a little video demo. The blog's called How to Use Voice Dictation and Work Smarter. I've been using this for 12 years, which is why I've written so much content. Used it to write policies, used it to mark books. Moving on to the plan section. So again, these are just the highlights. I'm going to try and get through this in 20 minutes. So if you need to go, it'll all be recorded and I'll send it your way. Lesson planning, there's 3 ways. Our initial teacher training providers, not all of them, and certainly not today, but historically, and it's still evident in some places, NQTs, trainee teachers have to write laborious 2 or 3 page lesson plans as evidence or to support an observer. On the other extreme, you've got doorknob lessons. I turn up, open the door, and I make up the lesson as I go along, and I rely on my experience. If I do this 25 hours a week, I'm going to burn out. I'm going to leave the profession. If I do this doorknob lessons, so my border collie's barking in the background, 25 lessons a week, it's not fair to the kids, but also the stress and anxiety I have because I've not planned and kids are demanding more work is not helpful either. So back in 2007, with John Bailey and Catherine Verbal Singh. This template was designed. I put it on Twitter. I got a bit brave and I said, I'm going to do this before an Ofsted lesson, and it went viral. And this was in a landscape where graded lessons were happening, and you had to submit a lesson plan to inspectors and to school leaders for observations. But beyond that, the longevity of this plan is because it's dual coding and it's bite size and it sits between both extremes. And it's essentially a thought process of a what, so objectives, a why, make content stick, retrieval practice, curriculum, and then how you teach, hook kids with a story, dress up, quizzing through various types of methods, keywords, etymology, numeracy. I meet some children's needs rather than all, because I don't believe it's possible in a one-off lesson. And then the episodes, teacher-led, student-led. Is your lesson an hour and a half or is it 30 minutes? So back on the site, the 5-minute plan. If you're planning lessons, which I'm sure you are, some of you be able to do it in your sleep, other people might be new. There's a little template there. There's a digital version. If you let me know, I'll send you a code. You can access this free for the virus period. What's great about the digital plan is you can adapt the headings, so you can actually design your own templates and put your own headings in, so you can use it outside of a lesson plan method. And like I have done on these templates here, create ones for interviews, for assemblies, teaching remotely, designing a curriculum plan, whatever you want. So that's it. But this works on the basis of a what, a why, and how. I'll send the digital code later. Let me make a note so I don't forget. Sorry, everybody, 5-minute code. And it works on the premise of command words, so being clear and precise. Hattie's research, John Hattie, for example, talks about teacher clarity, and it has quite a huge impact on pupil outcomes. Again, be cautious of Hattie's research, effect sizes, the meta-analysis. I've met John, fantastic piece of work. Rather than me just talk about it, I'm just going to signpost for all your benefit. This was one of the things that we were looking at as we developed Mark Plan Teach, as it started to get a lot of noise. So Hattie's research goes back to about 2000, in fact 1999, but 2005, he started to produce this little page, visible learning. You got Hattie's ranking here, all the effect sizes. It's almost gone to biblical scale. When I first looked at this, it was 136, now there's 252. Be cautious of effect sizes above 1. But we had feedback here when I first saw this for marking. Well, as a DT teacher, is it written or verbal? Because I speak to my kids in workshops more often than we write. And with caution, you can go down all of these. You'll find drugs in here. So kids with ADHD, obviously drugs is the headline, but look beyond it. But the great thing about this, it probably should be signposted better, is this little PDF link. You've got it all in a nice 2-page summary. So I'm going to assume the majority of you are familiar with John Hattie's Visible Learning. There's the 2-pager. It's all color-coded. It's a nice thing for your office to have a look at for teacher discussion. So that's what we did for 3 years. Looking at it further, the stickability of that content, what sticks, I want to test it next lesson. The experienced teachers look at their schemes of work. Lesson 1, photosynthesis. Lesson 2, biomass fuel. Lesson 6, water and life on Mars, or whatever it might be in the science curriculum. Probably not that lesson, but the retrieval, as I get to lesson 6, right kids, how do you spell photosynthesis? Let's do a quick test. Can you just write down what photosynthesis is? And the research is really clear on this. Regular low stake testing over time is good for retrieval, rather than what I used to do as a student and also as a young teacher, is teach the scheme of work and test kids at the end and wonder why I got frustrated because their results were poor. It's not backed by the research of retrieval and interleaving and space practice. Things that really influenced me and the teachers at the time was these types of tools. So I'm going to just come out and just type in here, learning scientists. These are 4 female cognitive scientists. So I've met all of them. 1 or 2 podcasts on my site. From Carolina Cooper-Tetzel, who's one of them. Their blog's been around for a good number of years now, and I believe some of their resources and ideas have influenced English pedagogy, or at least allowed us to access retrieval, dual code and spaced practice terms because of their materials, their podcast, books and videos. So going back to 2014, we looked at this quite a lot, and one of the ones that worked for us was this method of retrieval. The simplest term for retrieval is the cognitive scientists call it retrieval. Their definition is the simple act of writing it down or saying it out aloud. But teachers, with the frustration with cognitive sciences, we've been doing these things for years. We just call this revision. So it's nothing new, but what's welcome is that this is great new dialogue, which raises the profile of teaching, that actually teaching and learning is a complex thing, and the immersion of how we learn and the brain and the cognitive science aspect makes teaching a richer place. So last month, photosynthesis, last week, biomass fuel, last lesson X. Here's the key question, kids. Where I've seen this work well, large A3 sheet laminated on the desk, kids write down ideas, rub it off at the end of the lesson, retrieve. It could just be 3 or 4 minutes, but it needs to happen every lesson. And that supports the stickability method, and also great for lesson planning, retrieve. So there's a great resource. I've seen this work really well with young pupils in primary. It's gold dust for secondary pupils. Signposting this resource curriculum, so you've got all that in there. Loads of resources. I've already signposted all this. Right, let me put this link in the chat box for you. 5-minute booklet. Let me just switch who I'm sending that to. Apologies, everyone. Here we go. That should give you a PDF of all these together, or at least the highlighted ones in there, so grab that. I'm going to whistle past this idea. If I was with you physically, this is a great idea for literacy, and I call it a flying start. Why? Because it's great for the start of a lesson. It works brilliantly on Monday morning when you're asleep, and on a Friday afternoon when I'm exhausted and the kids have had enough. If I was teaching you in food technology and we'd made a pizza, I'd ask you to draw a circle. I'd get you to divide the circle into 6 pizza slices. I'd get you to number the slices. And then I would, in disguise, introduce a spelling test as a retrieval exercise. So pepperoni, chopping board, and whatever it is. And I get people to spell the words. And as they swap the papers, so the interesting thing here, if I just get you the graphic, I get everyone to crunch the ball up into a snowball after 3 words. They throw it across the room. The next student opens it up. They spell check the 3 words. So 3 words in here. They spell check it, redraft it in here. Crunch the ball up. I give them 3 more words. They write them down in here. Spell check. So they rotate the paper. It is a fantastic exercise. I've done it with 22,000 teachers. Teachers love it too. A flying start, it's brilliant. The point being, it does these things. Retention of knowledge, improves literacy. You can do it any point in the lesson, inside or outside classrooms. It's engaging, works brilliantly Monday morning, works brilliantly Friday afternoon. Going back to the visualizer, I get my kids to throw it into the paper basket. I might hold it so they try and hit me. It's all a bit of good fun. And then the ones that go in the bin, I put it under the visualizer and we do a little spell check together. It's a brilliant strategy. You don't need to throw the paper if you're not comfortable. And kids can get a bit rowdy, but as a routine, the kids know straight away and they do it in their sleep almost. So it becomes a very good process. When I do that with you physically, what I've noticed is even teachers, qualified teachers with lots of clever degrees, get very excited and they get immersed in their learning. So I've done a lot of reading research on this fella, Mihail Csikszentmihalyi, who's a Hungarian psychologist. I think he lives in Croatia now. I think he's about 88. But he's got a great TED talk called The Flow Model. And he talks about immersion. And this often manifests itself when kids get lost in their learning. They get excited, can't believe the lesson's gone very quickly. And when you say pack up, they kind of want to carry on. If you pitch your work too high, for their ability to get burnt out, they get challenged. If it's too low, they get bored. So the challenge for teachers is pitching between trying to move Ross from apathy to flow. If I give them an intense focus on an activity, it's selected, but I've chosen the choices carefully. It links to a clear success criteria, and I give them immediate feedback. I talk to them in class, or I use verbal feedback methods. the students can move on much quicker than they can traditionally through writing or various different challenges and their abilities. So it's all in here. There's a lot to explain through a webinar, that one, but it's fabulous. And that snowball technique best summarizes this immersion in learning. Moving on, the teach section, I'm going to just type in this in the chat box. What I love about this is all through our careers, all of us have tried to find various tools on a whiteboard. What I love about classroomscreen.com, this is designed by a chap in the Netherlands, is that you just change the background if you want to, but all the things in here, you've got all these little widgets. So it's just loading up here. It gives you a timer. It gives you the traffic lights. It puts kids into groups. There's the traffic light thing. So you go red, amber, green, kids, off you go. There's a timer. It's all on your screen, all the different things you can do. Notice in the bottom right hand corner there's a red and the green button. At the end of the lesson or during the lesson, you can activate an exit poll. You type in today's question, you choose the voting method, and kids come and tap it on the device. And it gives you a number of votes. So you can see here, and it builds up the score, and then you can show the results. So that's a really good tool for the teach section. Other things that I was looking at, I'm sure many of you have already seen Barrett Rosenshine's work. I was looking at this in 2016. It was written about in Mark Plan Teach. One of my colleagues, Tom Sherrington, has just written a great book, a red and black cover, summarising his version of the research. Again, going back to PhD research, Rosenshine's research is 40 years of his academic life. It was published in a paper in 2012 in a journal called American Educator. If you go to my blog, type it in as a title, PhD, the theory of the world, doctorate is the practice of the world. So think of teachers and doctors and nurses here. What I've tried to do to bridge the gap is blend between, so in this blog you've got a sentence which explains what the research says. It says, waiting for it to load up, sorry, my website's too many things open, slow broadband. Let me just close a couple of things. So what I've tried to do is bridge the gap between what the research says in a paragraph, what a teacher can do in the classroom, and in a resource. So I've broken the 17 into 10 easy, digestible methods. If you've not seen this, it's gold dust. It's worth looking at. Don't turn it into a checklist for observations, and don't assume you'll see all 17 happening in one lesson. If I think of number 4, give clear and detailed instructions, to think of John Hattie's Teacher Clarity. We've got the MINT. This is my one acronym I squeeze into profession. Nearly finished, folks. This is how it would look in the classroom. So this is in one of your sketch notes. Right, kids, you're going to need an A3 piece of paper, a pencil, and this pink worksheet. Move around the classroom, look at the displays with your partner. Quiet conversations. You've got 7 minutes. Off you go. If I say any questions, Ross says, "Sir, I've lost my pencil," or "Did you see the football last night?" And I lose that clarity. This is a great way for providing direct instruction that's clear, precise, and kind of punchy. Now, you won't use this all the time, but with that key information or instruction, that's a great resource to support that great methodology. Lots of research in the book and in the cartoons. Here's some signposts here. Number 4, and particularly those teaching disadvantaged pupils. This research by Coe et al. Suggests when teachers are clear and precise, has a higher impact on their outcomes. I guess we define that by exam scores. Question techniques, Fermi questions. Not a lot of people have heard of Enrico Fermi. He was a statistician. He worked in the field of statistics. He posed limited questions to elicit more creative responses from his employees, to encourage a process of thinking rather than the answer itself. I see this as brilliant for classroom discussions. It's also great for workload. If we were in a traditional classroom together, I might pose a Fermi question. How many balloons can you fit in this classroom? The result is everyone gets into discussion. Some of you are thinking, how big's the balloon? Some of you start brainstorming balloons. I'm having a pep talk with Ross outside about his behaviour. 30 seconds later, I come back. Right, kids, I forgot to mention it was a hot air balloon or a small water balloon. So that's the process. There are loads of fun examples here. It works on the premise of how many, but it doesn't have to be how many. If you're teaching a different subject or younger pupils, I've got a glass of water here. I could say, what will happen if I drop this cup? Discuss. How might it shatter? If I've got a Malteser, how many Maltesers can we fit in this glass? So that's the process. What's good for teacher workload is it gives me breathing time, gives me time to drink, have a pep talk outside, restart the projector, get the marking out, all sorts of things. So on the blog, type in Fermi. You've got 2 blogs which have about 100 questions examples in each. So there you go. Have a look at those. Loads of Fermi examples. It explains it a little bit more. It's a great tip for getting kids to discuss, to think. It's also be a good retrieval process as part of, if you're teaching, well, you're all going to be teaching remotely at the moment. Hinge questions, assessment for learning. I've got a hinge questioning template on the 5-minute plan. I could say how many water balloons, then we get a right answer, we get a wrong answer. It allows me to construct it. So here's a great retrieval method. I could say here, how do you spell photosynthesis correctly? And I give you 3 choices. A right, a wrong, and a possibility is another potential. Doug Lamoff's book, so I know I've interviewed Doug on my podcast, I've met Doug, Teach Like a Champion, great book, principal, and now we're running charter schools over in New York State in America. He researched Mary Budd Rose, so it's another book that we researched in our teaching groups for developing Mark Plan Teach. What I love about Mary's research is that most teachers wait 1 second after they pose a question to class. The result is I have less time to draw richer responses from pupils. So the recommendation was where teachers paused for longer, give kids more thinking time. And it's obvious, but you'd be very surprised how me, you, everyone else poses questions but doesn't deliberately practice that pause. So the recommendations, why it's important, kids need to learn how to have some period of time to listen. They've got to stop calling out and learn to take a turn. If you're doing this with 4-year-olds or 16-year-olds, all those children are developing cognitive ability. So they all need to learn how to communicate, time to understand questions. And that method of holding back a name or forcing a 5-second period to think about the question before I ask an answer is probably very valuable. The pose, pause, pounce method is something I wrote about in The Guardian in about 2010. I used to work with a teacher who called it this. It was picked up by Dylan William. He spoke about it. So Dylan William's an academic now based in Florida, a former Welsh English teacher and professor. He picked it up, talked about it in the keynote. It's on YouTube, and I wrote about it, and then it kind of went viral. Well, I say viral loosely, but a lot of English teachers now know about this method. And it kind of supports Mary Budd Rose research. Pose the question, hold back the name. If I just say one name, I'm not encouraging all other students to think out. A pause, pounce the student. Rather than me give the answer, I bounce their answer to another student. Why? To clarify, to challenge assumptions, to retrieve that long-term memory, and to predict what I need to reteach. My biggest passion is assumption. Now, if I had, and I know I've already gone over time, if I had more time with you and more interactivity, I would be testing you on all this content throughout the day, because I can't assume that you've remembered half of this stuff. So one thing I would encourage you to do is watch back the video, look at all the blogs tonight, tomorrow, in a month's time, and when you get back to school in September, to retrieve it from your long-term memory, and as teachers, improve your own performance, never mind the kids in the school. In the resource pack I sent at the start of the chat, so I'm going to send all these again. Got question templates, use that method. That's just an example. You can use this process with any planned questions that you have. Rarely do I meet a teacher who has all their questions planned for a scheme of work, but for about 20-30 minutes of your time, this is a resource. When I did this, I used time and time again, and I added new questions, but I had it to hand. So it's well worth doing that, so you have all your questions planned. It reduces your thinking time and puts pupils on the spot rather than you. A couple of things that we watched from Doug Lamoff. I'm going to show you this one. So it's 1 o'clock, folks. I reckon I've got, I've been promising you lots of different times, 15 more minutes. So hang on the line. If you're already logged off, it's all going to get recorded and shared with you. But I just want to go through the ideas. I'm at my desk. It's day 34 for me. I'm not on another webinar till 3. So 15 more minutes. I'm going to show you this one video of what's called cold calling and just explain it. So this is from Doug Lemoff's book, Teach Like a Champion, and this is Hannah. They've got a class. There's another video clip. These are all on YouTube. I do dream of a day where we have, I know people are watching from other parts, but we have a bank of videos where we can watch each other and they're narrated so that we can learn from each other beyond their own classroom spaces. Here's this video clip. Turn the microphone on.
Here we go.
One of the most powerful things you can do as a teacher is to cold call. That means calling on kids regardless of whether they've raised their hands. When you cold call, you want it to be systematic. Watch how Hannah Loftus does that. The first thing you'll notice is that it's pretty clear that everyone is going to get cold called. It's not personal, it's how she teaches.
Let's go. Word 1, what word, Cartier? 2, what word, Tatiana? 3, what word, Dion?
Hannah's kids now know they have to be listening carefully and ready at any time. They're engaged even before they get called on.
Word, Jameer. 7, what word, Marcellus? Very good. Let's go top down.
The second crucial thing about Hannah's cold calling is that she's positive. Cold calls shouldn't be a gotcha. Not, what did I just say, Sarah? But a real question. And you want the student to get it right.
When we left Edna and Carla, give me a quick synopsis.
Let's watch Hannah one more time. She's going to call on one of her students twice, which is a great way of showing them that they have to stay engaged even after answering one.
This student in the middle.
Let's go. Word 1, what word, Cartier? 2, what word?
But notice Hannah's smile.
3, what word, Dion? 4, what word, Dion? Mysterious. 5, what word, Janai?
That smile is a home run. The message is, we're in this together. I'm going to challenge you, but I'm happy when you succeed. And we can even have a little fun along the way.
So if we were together physically, I would actually do this with you based on all the content I've taught you through, and I'd model the cold calling technique. And in this video clip, I'd also ask us to analyze what happened here when the teacher asked Dia 2 questions in a row. And you can see the pause and hesitation. And the cold calling technique is that pupils are retrieving from the long-term memory very quickly. It's clearly a routine, and it's actually a good thing. Going on to another clip is the no opt-out one. I'm going to play this one where it's a bit, we call it pose, pause, bounce. Bounce in England. The student says an answer, it's not quite right. The teacher goes around the classroom for more data. In this case, you'll see 2 clips. The first teacher says, allows kids to put hands up and determine where the lesson goes. The second teacher says, no, put your hands down. I'm going to cold call and also use no opt-out, whereas if you get the answer wrong, I'm going to come back to you and ask you to give me an answer. So watch this one. This is a minute long as well. And this is called No Opt-Out. It comes from Doug Lemoff's Teach Like a Champion. Sorry, my internet's slow. Here we go. And these are all some of the ideas that we looked through as part of developing Mark Plan Teach. Here we go.
All right, number 10. According to Judaism, who was the greatest of all prophets? Damien, you remember? Who was the greatest of all prophets? Jesus. No, not Jesus. Help him out. Emmanuel? Abraham.
So notice hands going
No,
up.
but we talked about him yesterday. Who was the other one? Isabella? Moses. Who was it, Emmanuel? Moses. Who was it, Damien? Awesome. Moses. The greatest prophet.
Here comes the second clip. Teacher says hands down, moves the answer around the class.
Enlistment. What does enlistment mean? Enlistment. Keep your hands down. I'm just going to cold call you. Bella, what's enlistment? Okay, so I appreciate your effort. So you said, I don't know, but maybe it's when you want to go to the military. Can somebody give her a little hint that might help her with enlistment then? Somebody give her a hint that can help her make a better definition of enlistment, right? Okay, so signing up for the Air Force. So Bella, give us your definition again. what you said, but along with what Zaria said as well. So enlistment, Bella, what does enlistment mean?
When you want to go to the military and sign up.
Very good.
Okay, so that's that clip. Teacher navigates, you've got one version hands up, the other version hands down, but the principle is first student response is not good enough. I go around the classroom and I come back to the original student to enrich. Now, if we were face-to-face, I would do this with you and I would model all these 4 techniques together. I would ask anybody, cold call. If you get the answer wrong, no opt-out, I would come back to you. And wait time, I'd give you 5 seconds to think about the question, and I would ask a Fermi question. So often in my training, I'll do a bit of cognitive science. I show everyone this sentence. It's in your short-term memory. I give you time to read it. I ask everyone to read it out aloud. Finished files, a result of years of scientific study, combined with experience of years. I remind the class, so you guys in a training session, don't call out, don't put your hand up, don't whisper. And then here's my question, and I wait 5 seconds for a response. How many letter Fs do you see in this sentence? So I give people time to retrieve that data. Most people get it wrong because they're under pressure. When we look at the sentence, we discover there are 6, okay? We've got command words here. We've got or finish is a fox sound, of is an OV sound. Under pressure, under performance, cognitive load increases. We then end up making the mistakes, particularly also if this is in their short-term memory. So here I finish off with redundancy effect. When I start to hinder learning or performance because either I present information too much all at once or in an unhelpful way. So this slide best sums this up. On the left, bears enjoy eating honey, says the teacher. It's on the slideshow and it's also written in text. All that information at once, first time, working memory gets redundant and overloaded. Compared to, I just say bears enjoy eating honey and it's on the slides. Now, how I would do that as a resource, now teachers don't have time to do these things, but at least if we think about it better, we can start to adapt our materials. Here's my slides, right kids? What do bears like doing? Eating honey. Ross, can you say this complicated sentence? Let's just learn to retrieve these key words. And then I present it all together. I might give you a concrete example. Here's a jar of honey, dip your finger in, describe what it tastes like. If we've done the risk assessment, we can bring the bear in next, and all sorts of ways. I'll give you this one example. I'm a big fan of non-verbal signals. On that screen, you've got a maths equation. Don't type in the answer on the chat box just yet. I've written it on my whiteboards, and I'm going to just show it to you on the camera. So if we were face to face in the classroom, I'm going to show you two ways of doing this. I'll just turn this light off here. Here's version 1. 7 times something equals 28. We're looking for a non-verbal signal. Version 2. 7 times something equals 28. So version 1, 7 times something equals 28. Version 2, 7 times something equals 28. Non-verbal signals are just as important to support redundancy and cognitive load. Version 1, 7 times something equals 28. Version 2, I tapped. 7 times something equals 28. To make this more powerful, I need to, rather than teach to the back of my head, I face the class. You see how I pronounce the words because this is non-verbal data, and I say 7 times something equals 28. Those small tweaks in how we teach can improve people's performance, but also their capacity to remember things. I've got another webinar on memory. I'm not going to go into it too much here, but this is what I've learned in summary. Short-term memory, all these slides I'm presenting to you. Long-term memory, I've been talking about Mark Plan Teach for 6 years. I can do it in my sleep. Working memory, I might say to you, right, you can say the English alphabet A, B, C, D, E, but working memory, say it backwards. Could you tell me the 8th letter of the alphabet? That's also working memory. Within our long-term memory, we have explicit conscious memory, which is declarative knowledge. I'll give you an example. I know these are my glasses. Implicit memory, subconsciously, I know how to put them on. And that's procedural knowledge, that's a skill. And I would argue that skills is knowledge. And in here, procedural memory are things like riding a bike, you do it subconsciously. Priming is a bit like a bias. If I say doctor, some of you are either thinking of a man, some of you may be thinking of a female. And again, does your bias get in the way? Something to be aware of. There's a lot more of that one there. I could explain another time. And then we've got episodic and semantic memory. Episodic are personal events. It's a bit unreliable. It's a bit emotional. Things like weddings, birthdays, of course, they're going to be brilliant. Semantic memory is about the knowledge of the world. So New York, London, those types of, you can give me a fact about those cities. If you've been to New York, you're remembering the romantic experience you may have had visiting the city, going on various tours, but over time that memory becomes unreliable and it fades. I think if we learn this in more depth, we can become better teachers. And it's one of the things I wish I was taught as an NQT. It's taken me probably about 15 years to get to that point where I understand it better. I wrote a blog of a book I've been reading recently and what I learned from it, and I've developed a webinar building on my own knowledge. So that's worth exploring. Last thing is the question matrix. This is the last resource, folks. It's been on my site for a long time, very popular. All you need to do is add an image. You choose a question on the left, connect it to one on the top. It's great to reduce my workload, helps me script questions if I haven't planned them, and works brilliantly with kids on a blank bit of paper and they fill in the questions, or they come and stick post-it notes up on the board. I always used to share this image for the last 3 years. Now the virus and people queuing up 2 meters apart, I think that's going to be the new image that I share here, given the current situation that we're in. But how it works, post-it notes, right kids, fill it in on your book, work alongside a teaching assistant. If it's acetate, I can put it over a drama performance, PE lesson, or some still life, and I hold the L-shaped side of the question, so this across the top and left, this bit's all cut out, and it's a great way for scripting questions. You can hide and reveal all the post-it notes. Kids can come and stick them up on a giant poster in the classroom. It is probably the best document I can give you. Finally, just great teaching. What I've seen in 2 years, these are the 10 schools I've chosen. They're not the best schools in the world. They're just normal schools doing normal things like everyone else. The challenge is that all schools face on the right. I've left funding aside. Each school said they do one thing really well, and I highlighted them in my new book. And essentially, on the data, so I interviewed probably 250 teachers and the 10 head teachers. This is what the head teachers said are their challenges and strengths. Good at managing people mental health, the curriculum, teaching, learning, but they struggle with research and actually assessment. I found very interesting. Teachers, strengths, thank God they said planning and teaching learning was a strength, but where they found things challenging was managing their own well-being and the complex range of people's mental health. I guess with local authority services also being reduced here in England, the pressure has also increased. Where they lack confidence is access and research. So I'll give you a few things to finish off with some signposts. In the schools that I see have developed a culture, if I think back to our Mark Plan Teach journey, this is what we did from top left kind of to bottom right. And to transform your CPD culture and get teachers talking about teaching, you have to protect it fiercely, and you have to allow teachers to talk about pedagogy on a regular basis. And it doesn't have to be an hour, it could be 15, 20 minutes. And if I think of the blogs, the books, the articles, these things are really useful for developing that vision and values, that from accountability to autonomy, where you can find a school where you can grow professionally. There are 32,000 schools in the UK. Why do you work in your school? I hope it's a school that makes you happy. So back to that grid there, the happier schools I see, and I don't visit all happy schools. Schools are very complex and difficult places to work for teachers, but it's important that as we get more immersive research, cognitive science, the social media world allows us to access ideas quicker. It's important that schools and school leaders keep up with dialogue and pedagogy to ensure that they, one, encourage their teachers to take risks, two, support their teachers for the professional development, three, stop them leaving their school or the profession prematurely. So back to this, folks. I'm just going to push this back on. I'm way over time, really poor planning on my part and timekeeping. I'll let this just load. So I asked you at the start, what's your number one workload issue? And you said marking is the issue. So it should, there we go, activate now. So we had 200 results. Marking, paperwork, planning, admin, and we've got data here. Were probably the biggest issues. You've got assessment probably squeezing in, but all the other things that appear normal part of our lives as educators. So marking drives teachers crazy. If I go back to the best policy in the world, that's what we did as a one-page summary in 2015-16. Couple of years later, I thought, right, let me just tweak it to 3 sentences, and that's what I shared at the start of the webinar. Assessment is regular, proportionate to curriculum time. I diagnose what to improve, so I build up a secure overview of where my pupils are and where they're going to. I plan my lessons, teacher clarity, mints, so that materials in or out seats, noise level, time. I'm the greatest resource in the classroom, and I need to meet the needs of my students. I'd probably get rid of the word all, because I don't believe teachers can meet the needs of their pupils in a one-off lesson, but they can throughout an academic year. Teach is that memory, that thoughtful use of explicit language, the etymology. I'll give you this one. Not many teachers know the etymological meaning of the word assessment. Actually, its root meaning comes from to sit beside. And what if we could sit beside our pupils more often and provide feedback? So going back to Cheek Zemma High, that apathy to flow or the immersion, if I sat beside you and gave you feedback verbally or live marked, it's more immediate, rather than what most teachers do is they mark books on their own after school hours or on their kitchen table at home, when it's often after the lesson. I think the workload burden with marking comes from accountability and exam boards. If I could summarize the 7 or 8 ideas I've just signposted, and apologize for not being able to do this with you face to face. Anyone with a teaching and learning responsibility who's in charge of other teachers is responsible for reducing teacher workload if you want to save the profession from exacerbating or oozing even more teachers prematurely. If we do less, so collect less data, mark less frequently, traditional written marking, think more carefully about how we deliver information. If we do less of it, we can do those things better. Zonal feedback is the yellow box. Modeling, I do, we do, you do, the live marking. You've got the 5-minute marking plan, the 5-minute lesson plan, stickability over time, the regular quizzing, the retrieval. I wait 5 seconds when I pose a question. So what's the first thing you're going to do when I send you this video? I give you 5 seconds to think, and then I pose Fermi, how many times are you going to watch the video? Hinge, can you remember how to spell Cheek Zemma High? Cold call, ask lots of questions, no names. You get the answer wrong, I come back to you. And then the question matrix, plan your questions. I do believe, I'm going to skip back to the retrieval grid. You can do this remotely given the period of time that we're living with coronavirus and COVID. You can send this to kids or Google Slides or Microsoft Hangouts, and all the kids type in it, and you see everyone retrieve what you taught them yesterday. This is the greatest resource a teacher can use. So I'm going to finish off there, guys. You've got all the cartoons. I'm going to send it all to you. I haven't had time to go through all the research ideas. This is what I'm doing for my doctorate, how to access research very quickly. You've got the 5-minute research plan. I'm going to send you all these slides, all these cartoons, the videos. You're going to be overwhelmed with so much to do. My one plea is just look at it and share it with your own teachers remotely at this time, because you're going to have a bit more time at least to engage. Thank you for parting with £15. I hope you think it's worth it. Thank you for investing with me, and let me know once we're back to normal if you want me to come and visit your school face to face and help bringing some of these ideas to life. Apologise for going over time by about 30 minutes. I think that's a lesson to myself. Not bad for getting 5 years of research into an hour. Apologise also for not getting lots of questions and interactive stuff going on. But I'm going to just sit here. So that's it finished. Any questions, stick them on the chat box. And I'll try and answer as much as I can see through. But if you want me to do this for your own staff, I'm happy to do this again. And I'll send you all the resources. Probably in about an hour's time. I just need to compress the video, and that'll take about half an hour. So any questions, folks? how we deal with exhaustive content. Well, I think the 5-minute lesson plan stickability, I said in a blog recently, particularly through the online, getting everything online, the challenge is we know retrieval is the best methods and we use time in class to reteach material. The challenge is parents or kids, when they see the same work, they don't understand the retrieval method, so they think they've done it before and they're always wanting something new. So that also exacerbates teacher workload. So schools out there could, if they help parents and children understand that they need to reteach and revise material to help with the long-term memory, hopefully that can reduce the digital workload and the millions of notifications that you're all getting through Microsoft, through Google Teams, and those kinds of things. Question matrix for drama, if you cut out the middle part and have the questions on the side, add some acetate, you can hold it over a live performance or a video and use it as a visual grid, a see-through periscope, as another idea. My email, if anyone wants to ask questions about me visiting schools in September or doing this for your school, use support. Here it is here on the slide, support@teachertoolkit.co.uk. That'll come straight to me. I'll email the slides and all the resources through Eventbrite, so check your junk box folders just in case. Right, that's it. I hope you have a good day. Keep up all the amazing work that you're doing remotely or physically and putting yourself at risk. Yeah, very interesting times, but amazing work that our teachers are doing in England, the UK, and thank you to all those that are watching abroad. I know there's 16 countries here, so I'm very flattered. And I hope that just a small insight into the Mark Plan Teach stuff will transform your thinking and fingers crossed your practice when you get back into schools. Anyway, I'm going to shut up. Thanks for watching. Keep safe and I'll see you again soon. Okay, bye now guys.